Now, President Trump's trade dispute with China continues to infuriate farmers in the Midwest. Now, China had just recently announced that it will stop all U.S. agricultural imports from the United States. So now most of the soybeans grown in the Midwest were sold to China. China says, you know what? You're going to put tariffs on us, then we're going to retaliate, and we're just not going to buy as much of your goods. And since Trump decided he was going to ramp up the tariffs against China, that they decided, well, we're just not going to buy from the United States at all. Now, that's, of course, a gigantic disaster for these farmers of soybeans who are already having a really difficult time, or were having a really difficult time, despite being bailed out, but to the tune of $28 billion. Now, what's the Trump administration's response? Well, apparently one official decided to make jokes. I kid you not. Bloomberg News has reported that there was a meeting between farmers and Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue on Wednesday. And apparently this meeting, by all counts, did not go well. Gary Werdish, president of the Minnesota Farmers Union, went off on Perdue, calling out the administration for causing, quote, devastating damage not only to rural communities. Now, he also trashed Trump's $28 billion bailout by saying, quote, the public already views it as a welfare program or a bailout. Well, we're not wrong. That is a bailout. It's literal socialism, which is funny. They are propping up this industry because they literally took away the customers for that industry. He did it with his own terrible trade policies. It turns out that when you do tariffs, trade disputes with China are not fun and they are not easy to win. Okay? It turns out we had actually a lot more to lose than China. Who would have known? Oh, right. Everybody knows. Now, you don't think that currency manipulators, by the way, which China does, would not manipulate their currency to hurt America? That's exactly what they did. Congratulations. Well done. So, look, anyway, as you can imagine, there was a lot of high emotions during this meeting. So, what Perdue tried to do is lighten the mood. Now, how did he do that? By saying this. He said, what do you call two farmers in a basement? A wine cellar. Now, you can imagine that joke did not go over well. In fact, that's the joke, drew overwhelming boos from the crowd. Oh, Sonny, read the room. Oh, you're in a room with a bunch of farmers, and then you decided to make a joke about them being whiners. Yeah. Okay. Well, it gets worse. Brian Tallman serves as president of the Minnesota Corn Growers Association, said that Trump's claim that farmers are doing great was an absolute lie. In fact, he said, we are not starting to do great again. We are starting to go down very quickly. Not only that, but American Soybean Association's Joe Schroers explained that they're in real danger of losing long term because of Trump's trade dispute with China. To which Perdue had responded with this: if your solution is to forget what China has done and sell and trade with them anyway with cheating, then I just fundamentally disagree with you. So, hey man, I don't care that you're losing your customer, your biggest customer. Sad day. We think China's doing things that are unfair. Now, here's the thing. Does China do things that are unfair? Absolutely. Look, they do IP theft, currency manipulation. They've done steel and aluminum dumping. Where they, take a lot of steel and aluminum and they bring it to the United States for a very, very low price. Now, that happens to hurt American steel manufacturers, right? So, look, that's a lot of problems, right? And yes, we do need to do something about it. But are tariffs the answer? Well, if you're still asking that, then you haven't been paying attention to what's going on. Because apparently tariffs are not the answer to this. And see, what goes on when you put tariffs is that it's not China that pays the tariffs. It's not these Chinese companies. It's American companies. It's American consumers. It's essentially a tax on American consumers. Now, that can be good depending on the circumstance, or it could be bad depending on the circumstance. Now, if the whole idea is to boost our manufacturing base for certain subject or for certain things, okay, so you do something very, very specific in the tariff, right, to help boost our trade or our manufacturing base or whatever, right, our certain business aspect. What Donald Trump has done is he's put a blanket tariff on everything except for his daughter Ivanka Trump's goods. That is not an accident, by the way. So now the other problem with tariffs is that if you depend on, first of all, exporting a big section of a sector of the economy, as soybeans and agricultural products are, in fact, I think over 75% of our U.S. agricultural products went to China. So if you endanger that with tariffs, well, that's a big problem, right? Or if you have that situation, a smart person would not endanger that with tariffs. And so what they did, unfortunately, is that's exactly what the administration had done. They endangered it. They put tariffs on, and China said, okay, all right, you want to mess with us? We'll definitely mess with you. And that's unfortunately what happened. They chose not to do business with the United States. And that presents a gigantic problem for the farmers who have spent decades cultivating these trade relationships. China is an enormous market, and there has to be a better way to encourage the Chinese to be more fair and to crack down on some of their terrible trade practices. But there's got to also be a way to do it without destroying our own agricultural sector in the process. And unfortunately, Donald Trump's already done that. Because at the end of the day, we are actually far more hurt than they are. And this administration, well, for one, they don't want to admit it. Two, they don't want to empathize with it. And three, they don't really care. All their solution is throwing more taxpayer money at this problem, at a problem that they created. And yes, you could say, well, Donald Trump goes and creates a problem, and then he goes and solves it, and then tries to take the credit. Except in this case, you can't solve this problem. Most of China now gets their soybeans from other countries. You cannot just undo that. You can't just change that. So these farmers will be hurt for decades to come. That's what's going on here. And so, look, giving them, bailouts and socialism, obviously not the answer. The answer is getting them to have a good, fair trading partner in the world. And unfortunately, President Trump does not care at all about doing that. And even if he did care, he doesn't know how, because he's not a stable genius and he's not a smart person. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent, progressive media.